Stories podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Weldin. Today's story is part 2 of The Wylderwood, a new original work co-written for you by Daniel Hinds and Joseph Montebello. The Wylderwood is a fantasy serial, which means that it's a really long story, so there will be a new episode every other week all summer long. Check out part 1 released last week. Thanks! Enjoy the episode! The Wylderwood. Chapter 2. "Sir!" Lochlan called, rattling as he ran in his armor. The lousy Froskers didn't have proper cobbled streets, just damp dirt paths, and the squire kept stumbling on roots and snarls. "Sir Ransear, I'm here, sir." He caught up to the knight just as he came down the stairs from the sail train. Sir Ransear was a leading member of the Sacred Gauntlet. Others could hurry and ready things. He would come when all was prepared and in order. "You've muck all over your boots, squire," Ransear said, his own armor shining silver moonlight, except for the right gauntlet, always red as ruin, same as Lochlan's own. "Remember that we must be examples, symbols of order in a world fallen to chaos." "Yes, sir," Lochlan said. He wanted to rush on, to ask what important task he could handle, but he knew that Ransear valued patience, and so he waited. The knight took his time, eyes wary under his helm, even in this friendly city. Finally, he started walking towards the Edgewater Hall, and Lochlan fell into step beside him. "Look at this place," Ransear said, making no effort to lower his voice. "It's disgusting. We come here because the Wylderwood has an old magic, but these Frosker, they're more frog than man, living in their pond water. It's not proper. I've told Shelsani we should build our own city here, something civilized and clean, but she says the Wylderwood wouldn't allow it. Bah! Give me a platoon of men and as many axes, and we'll see what's allowed." Lochlan nodded. "If there's magic here, we should control it." "That's a good lad," Ransear said. "You know, our founder, Orlum himself, came from a dirty little village in the countryside, not so different from this." Lochlan rolled his eyes at the dirt. He had heard this one about 1,000 times, and he mouthed the story along with his master. "Now, Orlum, he was a great man, the first knight, and he knew how ugly disorder could be, which is why he built the castle mount completely of stone. Everything in its place, earth salted so nothing could grow up unexpectedly, orderly and square. His sword clears our path," said Lochlan, as he was expected to answer. "Very good, Lochlan." Ransear paused as they reached Shelsani and the others. "Come to the hall when the drums sound. For now, study this city and learn the errors of its ways." He turned away without another glance at his squire. "Thank you, sir," Lochlan said. He was excited to roam the city, and even more excited to be done with his master's favorite lecture. He turned and headed towards what seemed to be the busy part of town. Somehow, walking as he pleased, he didn't even notice that he no longer stumbled. Soon, he was swallowed in a crowd of Frosker and some varied others, most of whom had been with the sail train. Rows of merchants called out to him, hawking shell pots and river trinkets they had for sale. Lochlan ignored most of it, but stopped to buy a long wooden skewer of roasted cray. They were sweet and spicy, and the smell alone had him drooling like a troll in a treasure trove. His eyes flashed over everything as he walked through the streets, dodging happy Frosker children and nibbling at his cray stick. The bright colors and noisy calls made Lochlan want to smile, but he knew that Ransear wouldn't approve. Instead, he gritted his teeth and kept a stern look in his eyes. Walking straight and tall, he thought, "Be the beacon that lights the way for others." Just then, a terrific cry went up from the river.
Hibble, bibble, lush!
Lochlan ran to the nearest bridge to look down. There, in the water, a troop of Frosker soldiers rode upstream in perfect formation. The troops were arranged in 6 rows of 4, with the captain shouting out in front.
Hibble, bibble, lush!
The riders surged forward so smoothly, Lochlan could almost hear the clatter of horse hooves. But instead of horses, each soldier rode a large fish through the river. The mounts had sharp-looking fins standing along their backs and long, pointed spines jutting from their mouths like the tusks of a boar. The Frosker rode them with fish leather saddles and woven ropes of something kelpy and colorful.
Hibble, bibble, hurrah!
The captain shouted, and the troops all swung hard to the left without breaking their formation. The points of their spears made straight lines like a deadly picket fence. Wow, Lochlan breathed, fascinated by how perfectly the Frosker soldiers seemed to work together. Their city may be dirty, but clearly the frog people weren't as silly as they seemed. At least, not all of them. I know, armies, war, spears, shouting, and who doesn't love it, right? Lochlan tilted his head forward a little and sighed. The annoying girl had found him. Again. You know, if you jumped in, they might let you join. You have the right look, Harks said. She was leaning back against the bridge next to the elf girl, Nezzy. Have the right look? Lochlan snorted. Like I would ever ride a fish. Actually, said Harks, that's who I was talking about. You're armored and prickly, and most of all, you smell like old kelp. Nezzy laughed, and Lochlan felt a flush creep up his cheeks. Why did this sorceress have to push him, and in front of an audience, too? Are you always this annoying? He snapped. Only when I'm in a good mood, she said, smiling widely. Well, in that case, you seem like a terribly cheerful person. Don't I, though? Harks laughed. Don't take yourself so seriously. You'll be happier for it. Well, some of us have to take things seriously, Lochlan replied. After all, I get to be in the room later when my master and the others meet with this Frosker druid. Oh, yeah? Harks said, nudging Nezzy with an elbow. You hear that? He gets to be in the room. What an important boy he is. Nezzy laughed a little and shook her head. Don't be mean, she said softly. Just tell him. Tell me what? Lochlan asked, but Harks only laughed again and started walking away. Nezzy shook her head and went along, and after a moment, Lochlan hurried after them. Tell me what? He asked again, falling into step next to Harks. Oh, just that you aren't the only one who's invited to this meeting, Harks said. I'm attending my master, Bobbidin the Bright. Lochlan felt his stomach flip. You're the apprentice of Bobbidin the Bright, the great wizard? That's right, she said. And Nezzy is learning from Shelsani. Maybe you've heard of her? Shelsani? Lochlan croaked, realizing maybe he should have paid attention to his companions back in the cart. Like, the archdruidess Shelsani? Yes, Nezzy said. She's quite wonderful. Lochlan cursed himself inside. Of course the others in his little cart would be important. He had seen they were young, his age, really, and Harks had been so jokey that he figured they were noble children along for the ride, not actually, well, important. Okay, well, maybe we got off on the wrong foot, he said to the elf. Sir Ransear, my master, he has great respect for Shelsani. He always says she's the greatest of the druids and a worthy ally. Lochlan choked a little, unused to this part. I'm sorry for not being more polite, Nezzy. Oh, it's okay, she said, blushing a little. Forget about it. They walked together in silence for a moment, weaving through the crowds in what seemed to be no particular direction. Ahem, Harks coughed, and then again when nobody said anything. Can I help you? Lochlan said. Oh, it's nothing. I just thought that since Nezzy got such a nice apology, I might be next in line. Lochlan gritted his teeth. She had done nothing but tease him, and now she wanted an apology? He was about to say something rude, and then bit his tongue, remembering that she was apprenticed to Bobbadin the Bright. The wizard was old, and he was just as powerful as Gorson or Shelsani or any of the rest. Okay, Harks, he said. Not now, Nighty-Night, she said, waving him off. There's something I have to do. Now she was interrupting his apology. Lochlan looked up and saw they were in a quiet courtyard alongside a gentle bend of river. Some high elves were gathered on a thick, leafy balcony, laughing and drinking from bottles of purple glass. What are we doing here? Lochlan asked, but he found he was alone. Harks was creeping forward, Nezzy by her side. They were approaching a solitary cart with iron bars for walls and a padlocked door. Inside, a large nest of rags and hay covered a lumpy form. Lochlan looked from the high elves to the sneaking girls, indecision gripping him. Part of him wanted to leave them to their scheme, but he could already hear Harks's voice in his head. Oh, little Nighty-Night, too afraid to come along for an adventure. Orlum's sword, he spat, and then hurried after them. He found them ducking behind some barrels by the cart and crouched alongside. Look who decided to tag along, Harks whispered, smiling. That smile unnerved Lochlan. It reminded him of the way his mother's cat would grin before she knocked a flagon to the floor. What are we doing here? Hissed Nezzy, looking back and forth nervously. I thought we were just taking a walk, Harks. You're going to get us in trouble. Lochlan looked at the elf girl and nodded approvingly. Yeah, isn't this the prison cart that was with us? It is, said Nezzy, and we were already told to leave it alone. People always say to leave stuff alone when it's interesting, Harks said. Aren't you curious? Curiosity killed the kobold, Lochlan said. Knights killed the kobolds, came a voice from the cart. Knights and swords. Nezzy jumped with surprise, but Lochlan turned, gaze sharp. Harks also spun, fire flashing in her eyes, and Lochlan had to admit to himself. She had good instincts for combat. Says who? Said Harks. All I see is a lump of old rags. Are you here to break me out? The voice asked. It was neither high nor low, angry nor sad. It just sounded resigned. Lochlan had heard voices like that before, in the dungeons of the castle mount. We don't set prisoners free, Lochlan said, outraged by the request. He was a knight of Orlum, and he'd sooner swallow his sword than loose a criminal. Out of the rags came a dry chuckle. Ah, the squire. Don't worry, I'd never have you break one of your precious laws. What about you, sorceress? You seem to have a healthy disregard for authority. Hark stifled a laugh. I appreciate the compliment, but I can't set you free. Then why bother me? Like I said, curiosity. You've been with us since Emiliana with those stuck-up high elves. I wanted to know what you did to make them so mad. The rags were silent for a long minute. Lochlan spared a glance at the elves on the nearby balcony. They were still drinking and talking, but for how much longer? If he got caught lurking and embarrassed Sir Ransear, he could only imagine what his punishment would be. 1,000 push-ups and 100 sword drills, and that would just be for starters. Come on, let's go, he hissed. This is ridiculous, wasting my time with criminal trash. I don't want to get in trouble, said Nezzy, her eyes pleading an apology to Harks. I have to go. Lochlan was happy at least one of them saw reason. Harks could stay if she wanted, and she could get punished when she got caught. The squire nodded at Nezzy and turned to leave. But as he passed by the cart, a chortling laugh came from the rags. Lochlan paused, just for a moment, and a hand shot out of the bars, snaring him by the wrist. "Listen to me, swordling," the voice hissed, an angry snake's warning. "Criminal, trash, you think you're better than me? I took a buck from the High Elf King's forest, took it to feed my starving family. I got caught, and they're sending me to a prison camp, to some hole deep in this miserable forest." Lochlan's stomach flipped like a landed fish. He tried to wrench free, and then tried again. "I'm stuck," he realized. The prisoner's hand was thick but small, like a child's. It should have been easy to break free, but when he pulled, the hand clutched tighter, grinding the small bones in his wrist. Drums began to pound. A heavy bass beat echoed through Lochlan's boots and rattled his armor. Boom, 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 they hammered through the city. "It's time for the meeting," Nezzy said. "They're calling us back." "Let me go," said Lochlan, trying to free himself without being embarrassed in front of the others. "You are not better than me," the voice rasped. Lochlan's blood ran cold, but from his first day as a squire, he had been taught to handle difficult situations. He took a deep breath, held it for a count of 4, and exhaled slowly. It was the first lesson Sir Ransear had taught him 3 years ago, but the words of Orlam sounded as clear as if it were yesterday. "A stone withstands the storm, serene. A mind that's clear, a blade that's clean." Lochlan told himself to relax. The truth was that he simply couldn't pull his hand out of this grip. Boom, 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 crashed the drums, an endless tide. Lochlan let the noise fall away. Harks was begging the prisoner to let him go, and Nezzy was worrying about what to do, but Lochlan had calmed down enough to see things as they were. He'd been caught by the prisoner, and soon he'd be caught by the guards, unless he found a way to free himself. "You're not better than me," the voice roared. The answer was suddenly clear to Lochlan. "His blade cuts us free." Lochlan reached for his sword, his red gauntlet closing around the leather grip molded to his hand like a favorite chair. He drew forth an inch of blade, and then, sudden as it appeared, the hand snapped back into the rags. Lochlan stumbled away, his armor crunching into a wooden barrel. "Quiet!" hissed Harks, but it was too late. "Who's there?" called one of the high elves on the balcony, waving at his fellows to quiet down. Lochlan cursed his plate mail. There was no better protection in a fight, but it wasn't well suited to skulking about. "You there by the prisoner cart," the elf called. "Stop right there! Don't move!" "Run!" shrieked Harks, mad with laughter. She grabbed Nezzy by the hand and slapped the back of Lochlan's helmet as they blew by. "Last one there is the Manticore's breakfast!" Lochlan grinned in spite of himself, flush with sudden excitement. Behind him, the elves shouted, and the voice from the cart started again. "You think you're better than me," the voice called. "You're not better than me, you hear? You're nothing." Boom, boom, boom! Lochlan looked at the cart, but felt the drums in his blood, calling him home like Orlam's song. Boom, boom, boom! He turned and ran, clattering after Harks and Nezzy. They'd just loved to beat him there, and the pair had gotten quite a head start on him. It wasn't distinguished, but Lochlan couldn't help himself. "Wait up!" He ran after the girls, who definitely weren't waiting, even though they were safely away from the elven guards. Lochlan was tired, but instead of getting more upset, he told his mind that the only thing that mattered was what was right in front of him, and everything else fell away. He spoke softly to himself. Only calm minds see the path that's right. Even as he ran, he knew that his mind could find him the path. Lochlan saw the girls and the busy street that separated them from him. He saw that by hopping a low rail and running in the shallow water of the canal, he could pull even with them. Then, as he jumped the rail, the end of his plan fell into place. That lily pad stem! Lochlan ran, fast as a loot hound, until he was alongside the giant lily pad. In his mind's eye, he could see that he was ahead of the girls now, since they'd be slowed by the crowded street. He hopped up onto the rail between the canal and the river and leapt without hesitation to the stem. The surface was smooth, but soft enough that his hands could grip tight, and it took him only seconds to climb high enough to see the girls in the crowd. He pushed off the stem and let himself fly, his boots coming down hard, armor clanking as he landed just in front of them. They stopped short, and Nezzy let out a surprised yelp. Lochlan grinned victoriously. "I see you jumped in the river after all." Harks's sarcasm was matched with a wicked smile. Couldn't wait to finish that apology. Lochlan scowled and fell into step with the girls. They couldn't even let him win right. It was awfully annoying. "Prisoners and frogs and muck," he spat. "I just want to be done here. I heard Sir Ransear telling that big Rhinotaur that once this red coffer business is over, we'll be leaving Edgewater as soon as possible." "That big Rhinotaur is Carathane," said Harks. "She may be the finest hand-to-hand fighter in the world, okay? Respect." "Ugh, she's big as all," Lochlan said. "My master could take her." He saw Harks roll her eyes, but chose to ignore it. Together, they walked on, finding themselves moving along with the great crowd toward the hall, the drums urging them onward. Tads, tasses, adult Frosker, humans, elves, even a lone dwarf with a huge hammer strapped across his back. Everyone seemed to be making their way to the hall, though most would only watch from outside. "Sir Ransear has been preparing for this all year," Lochlan said, leaving out how he wasn't allowed to be a part of those meetings. "Shelsani as well," Nezzy said, barely heard over the bustle. "She says we'll be pressing on into the Wylderwood after this. Whatever they have in the red coffer, it's dangerous. She says it can only be released at the Dawn Tree." Lochlan felt himself bristle. "Well, Sir Ransear says it's not dangerous, just that Gorson and the others don't have the strength to use it, whatever it is." "Wait, you two don't know what's in the coffer?" Harks asked. "Seriously?" "No, I never... Wait, do you know what's inside?" asked Nezzy. "No," said Harks, with another infuriating grin. "But I was really hoping one of you did." Lochlan glared at her. She had gotten his hopes up for a second. "I've only been with Bobbidin for a bit, and he says I'll learn when the time for learning is right, which is his way of saying never. He goes on and on about that red coffer, though. 'My finest spell,' she imitated, stroking a long, imaginary beard. 'Stronger than a manticore and lighter than a will-o'-the-wisp. Now where did I leave that dragon spleen?'" Nezzy laughed, and Lochlan started to smile, but then he sealed it away. He was going to be a knight one day, and knights didn't laugh at dumb jokes. "Looks like we'll find out what's inside soon enough," he said. They had reached the hall, a woven cathedral of trees and pads and ivy and wild growth. "Nezzy probably finds it beautiful," Lochlan thought, "but Sir Ransear would have me weeding until my blisters bled." "Well, let's go before they open it without us," Harks said, taking Nezzy's hand and pulling her along through the wild of the gathered crowd. The drums began to crash again, and Lochlan followed their measured beat, grateful for a piece of order in the chaos. To be continued. Thanks for listening!